G'day and welcome to Mr. Craftsmith. I'm Darren, and by the end of this video I have no doubt in my mind that you will completely understand how you can get perfect placement of your material on this waste grid to get the perfect engrave every single time. Now if you don't have a waste board, it might be worth having a look at a couple of videos I've done in the past, and I'll pop links for those down in the description. But in the first video we go through how you can simply design your own custom waste board directly in Lightburn in a matter of minutes, and it's definitely worth watching. In the second video we went through the process of how we took that design and we engraved it directly onto our waste board, which is just a piece of 16mm MDF, and it just makes my whole system portable and accurate every single time. In Lightburn there's a couple of settings where we actually start our job from, and for some people that might be a little bit confusing. So we're going to go through each one of those today and explain exactly what they are and how they work. So those starting points that we're going to be talking about are current position, absolute coordinates, and user origin. So let's break them down and we'll look at them one at a time. So we're going to be using those Lightburn settings to understand exactly how we can engrave a job here. So this is a job that I do every now and again for myself. I supply these little USB boxes to clients where we do some live streaming. I give them a copy of that on their own little box, and we personalize that with their details on the back and a bit of branding on the front, which doesn't hurt. Make sure you stick around to the end of the video because I'm going to go through an example of how you can create a template directly in Lightburn, how we can use that to produce 9 or 10 or a dozen of these in one engrave. So make sure you stick around for that one. Okay, so here we are in Lightburn, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to jump into my art library because I've created these in the past, and I'm going to go to my USB boxes and bring up my USB box top lid. So if we have a look at that one, I'm just going to center it on the page there. This is what I use as a template to produce my engraves, because I only do these boxes one off. So you can see here we've got the outline of the box, which is just a guide for me so I can get the placement of my logo exactly where I want it. And we've got those settings ready to go. So this is a set on a toolpath, so it's not actually going to output, and we've got those settings there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to group all those together and we'll just have a quick look at that one. The idea of this grid and the waste grid that we've actually produced is that they're basically identical. So the first starting position that we're going to be looking at is absolute coordinates. Now it may seem a little bit obvious to some, but absolute coordinates means exactly that. So this is our grid or our working area, which is 400 by 400 on the Ortur Laser Master 3, and wherever that is appearing on that grid is exactly where it's going to engrave on that waste board. Say for example we position this at 120 and 120. That's moved that whole job to that position, and the starting position of that is in this bottom left hand corner. Now if we jump over to the waste board, what that actually means is that if I place this box, and we can see that the little handle is to the right, if I place that on 120 and 120, we've just lined our job up perfectly and with confidence, knowing that if I put that on 120, 120, with the bottom left being my starting point, that's going to burn exactly like we're seeing on Lightburn. Now another method that you can use for that, and this is something that I use a little bit, it's just a builder's square. It's a nice flat, pretty heavy piece of metal. So the reason I use that is that means that with these longer edges, I can actually line up my coordinates a little bit better. So because we've got the diagonals going across here, I know that if I do 120, 120, it's going to be on a diagonal, and it makes it nice and easy to get those jobs lined up. So that's sitting right on 120 and 120. So I know I can just slide my box into there. This is heavy enough that it's not going to move around, and I know that that's in the exact spot. So even if I've got to do a couple, I normally only do these one off, but if I'm doing a couple at a time, I can pop this down here, I can just hold that down, take that out, put the next one in, and I'm ready to go. So the next starting position that we're going to be looking at is called user origin. And what that means is, as the user, which is us, we can actually define what the origin is. You might be thinking, well, how is that different to current position? It's a little bit different in that it stores it in memory. So say, for example, if I go into move and I want to go to 120, 120, and we do that, and that's because basically that's where this job is. And if I click on set origin, that has now stored that as my user origin, which is 120, 120. So even if I then move the laser for whatever reason, when I start that job, so I might move that to the middle where I might want to do an adjustment and get my focus distance right or something of that nature. What that means is that once I start that job and I set my job up, so in this instance, I would set this up to 120, 120 like we did before. So when I actually start the job, it's going to start from that 120, 120 position. So that can be a little bit handy rather than if you set something up and then you move it and then you've got to reset it. Setting the user origin is a really handy little tool so that it stores that point in the memory. Now the final start position is something that they call current position, and it's pretty obvious what that actually might be. So wherever the laser is sitting at the present point, that will be the start position of the job. So in this instance, if I go to the move tab and I want to go to 120, 120, because we're using that as an example because that's where we've set up the box. And if I go to 120, 120, you can see that that laser has moved to that point. And if I go into my job here, I can use that as my starting position. But where current position is pretty handy is if I'm doing some testing, material testing, or if I'm doing some cutting out where I don't necessarily have access to the grid lines, so that I can't really see exactly where the job is positioned. I tend to use that current position for cutting out templates and things like that. Like I said, we're going to do an example of how we can do that towards the end of the video, so make sure you stick around for that one. So we've got that job set up ready to go. So I'm going to engrave the top lid with my logo, not Mr. Craftsmith, but my other business. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a quick frame of that job just to double check that my position does actually marry up. It's always good to do a frame of your job before you burn it, simply because it's just a safeguard to make sure that you haven't miscalculated something. And I know a couple of times what I've done is I've put them on the wrong lines. So that's where I find the diagonal lines really handy, is because they're the same X and Y values. So in this instance, 120, 120. So what I want to do is I'm going to frame up the job and just make sure that the box is in fact in the right position. So we'll see as I run it around the box, the laser will be running right along the edge. So if we have a quick look at that one, and we can see that's exactly in the right spot. So that's framed up, ready to go. So on with the safety goggles. We've got the air coming in now. As I explained in previous videos, I do have an enclosure that I normally have going over the top of this. But because we are doing an example showing how things work on the actual waste grid, it just makes sense to have that open at the moment. So that one's done, and you can see by using this grid pattern that is exactly what we see in Lightburn. We can get super accurate engraves every single time because we have the exact coordinates. Now, it saves all that mucking around, fiddling around, just minor adjustments. You can do this in seconds with confidence, knowing that you've got that job in the right position. So I can do the same thing with the USB that sits inside of it. All I would need to do, it's already at 120, 120, so I can just slide that in there. I know that's the exact spot. I can go into Lightburn and pull up that template that I've already pre-done, and I can set that to 120, 120 in Lightburn, use absolute coordinates, and I know it's going to be right every single time. So next thing, we're going to show you how you can quickly set up a template where you can do multiples of the one product. Okay, so we're back in Lightburn and we've got the USB stick here. So what we can see is the template for that one. And if we look at the measurements on that, the width is 61 millimeters and the height is 19 millimeters. So for the time being, I'm just going to get rid of that design and we're going to go 61 by 19 millimeters. So if I get a rectangle and I go on here, 61 millimeters wide and 19 millimeters high. So if I bring my USB stick back into the, if I double click that one, that brings it onto the artboard. And if I grab those two, they should be able to center up exactly. So you can see there they are exact. So let's just get rid of that one for the time being. All I'm going to do, let's say I wanted to do a template that I wanted to do a dozen of these at a time. If I select this one, I'm going to pop it on a cut line. I don't want to fill, I want a line, and I'm just going to create an array of those objects. So if we go over to here to create an array of the selected objects, I can move this over to the side, and we're going to do 12 of them. So I'm going to do 3 wide and I'm going to do 4 deep. Okay, so I've got an array there, and then all I'm going to do is I'm going to put a rectangle around the outside of it. So if we look at that one, let's just round that one off to 260 by 160. And I'm going to group these objects together here. So I'm going to group them. And now I'm just going to select both of those and I'm going to center those objects together. So that's dead center. Now you could put a label on here to let you know what that template's going to be. So I might put a text on there, bamboo USB, and I might just change that to a fill. And then I'm going to center those. So that brings the label into the middle. So now what I can do is I've got this template all set up and I can cut that out of 3mm MDF. And all I've got to do is put a scrap piece of MDF. It doesn't have to be exact, because what we're going to do is we're going to cut the exact dimensions. So if we do that one, and I'm going to save that one, I'm going to group it together. And then over here in my USB boxes, I'm going to create this graphic as a template. So I'm in the art library. All I need to do is import the graphic from the project and call this 12-pack USB stick. Okay, and you can see that that one has actually been added to my art library. So even if I delete this one, I can then double click, bring it back out, center it on the board, center it on the work surface. So what I can then do is I can get my USB stick here, this one, and if I was to move that into there, now if we have a quick look at that one, you can see that that snapped into position, and then all I would need to do is go into the array and have a look. I want 3 of those and 4 down. Reverse the direction and they've lined up perfectly. So now what I can do is with this template, I can change that to a tool path, and I know that's not going to output now. So all of the stuff here that's going to engrave, I just change that to a fill. I've been mucking around with my layers, and I can set that template. Once I've cut that template out, I can pop that anywhere. And let's say I want to start that at the X position at 50 and 50. Then all I do is I place my template that I've cut out onto that point 50 and 50. Pop my USB sticks into each one of the holes, and away we go. So using the template example like we did with the USB sticks, here's one that I've actually done for a set of 6 slate coasters, so I can do 6 coasters at once. So it makes the whole job a whole lot easier. So I can just grab that template, which I've cut out on Lightburn already. I can chuck that onto my grid, and I might put it on, say, 20 and 20. I've got that there. So now we've got the template lined up, we can just pop our slate coasters in there. Now they're not always perfectly square, but what this actually does, the template, it gives us a really great guide as to exactly where those things are going to burn up, engrave into. And it just means that we can get things square. So they're not going to be crooked, they're going to be nice and square, because we've got those reference guide to use along the way there. And the last one goes in. So I know those are perfectly aligned, ready for my engrave, and I've just popped my design in wherever within that array. And I don't have to do 6 at a time. I can still use this template and get perfect placement for any number of burns or engraves that I want to do. It doesn't have to be 6, it could be 2, it could be 4, it could be 3, it doesn't really matter. You can just pop them in the appropriate box, pop the design in each one of those boxes, and you are good to go. I hope you did get something out of that one. It might have helped you understand those start origins a little bit better and how you might be able to apply those, and using this waste grid, how you can make your work so much more efficient. And in the next video, I'm going to be attempting the Norton white tile method. It's for me, it's been a bit of a process, but I've learned a couple of things along the way, a couple of tips that will actually help you get to the end point quicker. So I hope you tune in for that one. Now, until I see you in the next video, make sure you be creative and stay grateful. Bye for now.